Hi, so welcome to the Retribution Paladin update number 8. What I'm going to do with this one is do a full blooded overview. I did one of these about a month and a half ago, the last time. For those who've been following this series, what I've tended to do is when new changes have come out, whether they be hotfixes or a new build, I've tended to go out and test them and discuss those changes. But every now and then I'm conscious that there'll be new people watching this video, and maybe if you haven't kept up with all the changes that I've been going through, I don't expect you to go back and watch my old videos. What would be the point? So what I'm going to do is, and I'll probably do this every month and a half up until Legion launches, is do a grand overview. Now, there are a number of topics here and this could take a while. So for your viewing pleasure, I'm splitting it up into sections. And in the comments below, if you put show more to expand that out, I should have timestamps with the different sections. And those sections are going to be damage, rotation, which will be subdivided into single target AoE and single target ad swap. I'll just put one timestamp there. Mobility, defensives, utility, solo, the fun zone, more about that later, gameplay, and logs analysis. Okay, so damage first of all. Now, I know obviously from comments in the videos I've been putting out, as well as comments on forums, whether they be on the official forums or MMO Champion or Reddit or wherever, a lot of people have been concerned the last few builds that our damage has been really low, and it has been really low. And I have tried to caution against being too concerned by it, because, you know, tuning is one thing. What we need to be testing really is the gameplay. Do we enjoy the gameplay? Does it make sense? Will it be something that is easy to tune? Now in this, well, in last build really, there were a couple of hot fixes that improved us a little bit. And then in this build, initially, if you looked at the official feedback forum, it was people posting, well, there's no changes, so you're not going to get any new feedback and blah, 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 blah. Which was not only a little bit negative and probably a little bit unhelpful, but not entirely accurate either. Now, I am actually, because it seems to be flavour of the month or flavour of the week at least, going to be putting out another video this weekend on feedback in general and what I think, you know, the community and Blizzard are both doing wrong and right. But that's for later, drama later. For now, I want to get onto this. This build, there has been tuning going on. There was an announcement that tuning was going on. Now, I was discussing this with someone in my guild who's much more into testing than I am, who believed that, you know, it was in the PvP forums, it was entirely to do with PvP. Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but nonetheless, our abilities are being tuned and it has had a knock-on effect in PvE. So I can now present to you much more respectable logs. I absolutely would not worry about damage come the Legion launch. And the reason I say that, and the reason I'm not worried about that, I am worried about certain things. It's never damage. In every expansion I have played Retribution Paladin, there has never been a problem with the damage. I have never felt uncompetitive on damage terms. It is natural for people to worry about damage, because you think to yourself, well, Retribution Paladin, it's a DPS spec, yes? And you can see that Retribution Paladins are not brought in top 10 guilds. Like, there's some specs that are also, you're not in every guild, because, you know, there are some specs that are also not that great. But they'll be somewhere. But Retribution Paladins are notable by their absence and have been for a few years now. And even outside the top 10, it's like some guilds will have them and some won't. It is quite noticeable in the top PvE guilds that, generally speaking, as you go further down, there are more and more. But at the top end, some do, some don't. At the very top end, none do. But it isn't to do with damage. Our damage will be fine. Our damage has always been fine. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Nothing wrong with it. And it's, you know, the tuning has happened. We're in a much happier place. It's not set in stone. We're still a long way from Legion. We will be tuned up and down and up and down over the coming months. Just try and forget about that. Let people who are in alpha, when you yourselves, maybe if you're not in there already, but maybe you get beta access at some point, again, don't worry about it. Just go with it. Keep putting the feedback in. But other than that, just keep go for it. Now, rotation. Our rotation, I'm going to split this into three ways. Single target rotation, AoE rotation, and single target with ad swaps. Now, our single target rotation is generally quite nice. It's all right. At the moment, we are taking Final Verdict, Greater Judgment, and I am taking Virtue's Blade because this talent means that my Blade of Justice crits do triple damage instead of double damage. In my current alpha gear, I've got just over 30% crit, so I'm going to crit a fair amount of time. So that's sort of working out better, especially as Blade of Justice was buffed in this build. And the rotation is relatively straightforward. If you use Judgment off cooldown with that, there is no Judgment window. It is not at all like Colossus Smash. It will always be on that target. So just use your finishers whenever. You know, the aim of the game obviously is to use finishers because they do a lot more damage than our builders. And it's just rinse and repeat. And the people have looked at that, thought there's only a few bits and it's a bit boring. It's a totally boring rotation. However, you've got to bear in mind there will be a few changes. I do not believe that this is how we will be playing single target come Legion launch. It'll be much more likely that we'll be taking execution sentence. If execution sentence is not the best talent to take on a single target fight, it never will be. So we will absolutely take that. And I have got here a bit later some gameplay me using execution sentence just to try it out. And also I didn't take Greater Judgment because also I believe the Greater Judgment talent will change. I think there will be a window. There is no point in having that debuff if there isn't going to be a window. So I took myself off Greater Judgment and I put myself on Execution Sentence on a single target fight and play that. And the way that works is the way I am playing it. I'm not saying that this is the mathematically best way to do it, but the way I am playing it is fire off Execution Sentence, leave Judgment alone, build up your Holy Power. Once your Holy Power is built up, use Judgment. So that way when the Execution Sentence lands, and remember it takes 10 seconds to land, it doesn't do ticking damage anymore. It takes 10 seconds to fall just as now, but it only does its damage when it lands. So make sure the Judgment debuff's up for that. And also make sure you use your finishers. It's not as hectic as you might think, because you think, oh, this window, I've got to get as many finishers in as possible. You will realistically only get 2 in that 6-second window. If you've got Wake of Ashes and it's traded to give you 5 Holy Power when you use it, and it's available, all right, you could get a third off. But it's not that hectic. In a 6-second window, unless you've got like no Holy Power when it happens, but that would be foolish, you will be able to get 2 off quite comfortably. And you won't be able to get a third off no matter how much you push it without Ashes to Ashes, as I say. Now, and that's largely a rinse and repeat, but it's not quite, because they don't have the same sort of cooldowns. They'll run away from each other a little bit. So it's not a simple case of Execution Sentence, build up your Holy Power, Judgment, finishers, Execution Sentence, build up your Holy Power, rinse and repeat. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes there will be a time when you have to use a finisher outside of your Judgment window. Just go for it, doesn't matter. All that matters is when you use Judgment, that your Execution Sentence, when it lands, that Judgment debuff is up, and you get 2 finishers off. If you're and when Wake of Ashes is up, maybe 3. When that's happening, you're okay. If you're using a finisher outside of that window, okay, good. Don't wait. Don't just stand there, because you're wasting damage. So that's all right, and that's a bit more engaging playstyle as well, I have to say. So how does the rotation feel for single target? It feels fine when we play it as surely it's intended to be played. When it comes to AoE, there are some good things and some bad things. It's a bit of a mixed bag. We've got Divine Hammers for our Blade of Justice. Now, it's good. It does an AoE around us. It's really nice. It is good to have a completely AoE version of that spell. I really like that. It only generates 1 Holy Power, though. The downside to this is that you may be used to using a different version of Blade of Justice that generates 2 holy power, and then suddenly you go into this and it messes about with your muscle memory, if nothing else, because you're using it and it's only generating 1 and you maybe thought it generated 2, so maybe you try and use a finisher straight after and you've not got enough. Or, like, you know, earlier today when I was testing, I foolishly used Blade of Justice when I had 4 holy power. Well, I've wasted one of them. But actually, with Divine Hammers, you haven't wasted one of them. You would absolutely use it. So that messing about with you, what is effectively the same ability, even though it works differently, of course, and it's going to be on your same key binding, is going to generate either 1 or 2 holy power, depending on which one you've got. And I don't like the way that sort of can mess with your head a little bit. I don't know how many other people have a big issue with it, but I do a little bit. I would rather the whole thing was tuned so that it still did 2 holy power, like the other versions. Another aspect of it, at the moment it works outside of combat. That means you can use it to generate holy power outside of combat. Sounds great, you might think. As you're waiting to pull a boss, especially in a raid, when you've got a bit of time to do that, build up your 5 holy power, and as you rush in, switch it to a different talent, you still keep your 5 holy power. You might lose 1 in the time, but you still got 4 to start the fight with. Sounds great. The downside is it's not very fun. There's been a number of situations where Retribution Paladins have fiddled holy power, you know, for ranking and things like that. It's not something I enjoy. I mean, in MOP, you could use the holy PvP set to generate holy power with Flash of Light, I think it was. I never went into those shenanigans. At the moment, you've got people generating holy power outside the raid and being summoned in just as, you know, just when you're going to pull the boss. Again, you can start with 5 holy power and go straight into Seraphim and all the rest of it. Again, it's not for me fun to do anything that doesn't actually make sense. You know, when you're sort of, it's not really exploiting because it's not, you know, banned, but when you are using making clever use of game mechanics, so to speak, in a way that just doesn't make sense, I'm not a fan of that. Maybe they'll stop it so that it only generates holy power in combat. We'll see. But other than that, it sort of feels nice. Now, other aspects of AoE. Our Wake of Ashes, which is the ability we get from our Ashbringer, that does AoE damage. It does it in a cone. It's quite nice. It's instance on demand. When you've got it traited, it will do a dot. And against undead, it also does a snare as well. Against undead and demons, it also stuns them. Apparently as well, when the dot's on it, even someone was testing this on a training dummy. I need to test this on a boss, really, when it's traited. But I'm not going to do that in this update because it'll take me a little while to get that. They were saying that even when the dot's on it, even if it's not stunned, it's classed as being stunned for another mechanic, which I'll talk about later, which is quite interesting. But yeah, Wake of Ashes, really good in an AoE situation. You have to think about your positioning because it's a cone. It's not a full 360 degrees AoE around you. It's a little bit of a shame you'd have to think about positioning, but, you know, we're not the only class that has to think about positioning. We have got another trait which will also cause us to think about positioning called Divine Tempest, which means that our Divine Storm, which works, you know, as it normally does, will actually move 20 yards forward. So actually, a bit like Demon Hunters with their I-beam, we'll be wanting to try and position ourselves so that it will go through as many mobs as possible. So we won't just plonk ourselves in the middle of everything. We will want to be on the outside of the clump so that it can go through things. Now, where our AoE is really struggling is that the Judgment debuff only affects our primary target. And this Judgment debuff buffs the damage from our finishers. So it buffs Templar's Verdict, it buffs Divine Storm, it buffs Execution Sentence if we take that, it buffs Justicar's Vengeance, it buffs absolutely any damaging ability that uses Holy Power. And I have just named them all, actually. I say that as if there are more to come. The problem is if that debuff is only on the primary target and you're using Divine Storm is not benefiting. It's not getting any extra damage from our Mastery. And we know we're all about the Mastery. Mastery is always a good stat for us. And we're in a dangerous situation where it might be a really good stat for us on single target and really, really shit in AoE. Simply because this debuff does not spread. Now, to the rescue is a talent called Great Judgment. This spreads the debuff, but it's limited. And it's limited in a number of ways. One, it only spreads it to an additional 3 mobs. Now, when you've got AoE packs on raid bosses or in dungeons, there are often more than 4 mobs in total. So again, not all of the mobs are going to benefit. And of course, there's no way of guaranteeing that the priority mobs will get that debuff. It might just be the lower priority ones that will die very quickly anyway, if there are a number of different types of. The other problem with it is that it has limited range. It has a lot better range now. Last build, it was not. It had virtually no range. Even things just a few feet away wouldn't get it. Now it's much better. If you've got mobs in a reasonable clump around you, even spaced out a little bit, it will still spread to them. So from that point of view, it's a lot better. It's working a lot better. But think about this. Our Divine Tempest, like I said before, makes our Divine Storm move 20 yards in front. It's not spreading 20 yards away. So if there's a mob that we're hitting at the end of that, that's not benefiting from either. So a lot of our AoE targets are not going to benefit from our mastery. And to get any AoE targets to benefit from our mastery, we have to take this talent. There is no two ways about it. We are forced to take this talent. Now, in theory, you could say there's nothing really wrong with that because, after all, every class and spec gets talents that are suitable for single target, talents that are suitable for AoE. Yeah, sure. The problem with this one is that it competes with 2 talents that affect our Crusader Strike. One of them is Zeal, and the whole purpose of Zeal is doing AoE damage. But the effect of Greater Judgment is far better than Zeal. So Zeal becomes useless. So we actually have a talent that is completely useless. The other thing about Greater Judgment is it doubles the duration of the Judgment debuff. Now, in theory, that's pretty good because some people just don't. What they should do, and what I'm assuming they are going to plan to do, is to make it so that in theory you can get more damage out of not taking a talent that doubles the duration of the buff. In other words, if you can manage the window, a bit like Colossus Smash for Warriors, then you will be able to do more damage. But if you're not very good at managing that window, or you just don't want to, then you can take the talent and, okay, it won't do as much theoretical damage, but it'll be an easier rotation to learn. And that's always really good because it brings into this idea of a rotation for a class being easy to do, but difficult to master. So I've no problem with that at all. But the fact that this talent not only spreads the debuff, but also doubles the duration, means that you're going to take it for every single conceivable fight, or in theory, on paper, it just looks good for everything. So the other 2 talents you're just never going to take. So for AoE, it's a complete mixed bag. We have some really good things, but this mastery is just really bad. It would just be made easier, and everyone knows this, if instead of a debuff, it were a buff. And for the next thing, it absolutely would have to be a buff. Now, the next thing is, of course, single target, but with an ad swap. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, you're on a boss. There isn't only the boss up. There's no ads or anything like that. Every now and then, an ad comes in, and you have to burst it down really quickly because it's like really dangerous. We've had these sort of fights before, like on Imperator, for example, with the arcane aberration type things, or the little ogres that spawn in the corners of the room that do all the damaging stuff that you have to try and interrupt. That's the sort of thing. So you go from the boss, you move over to the priority ad and burst it down. This is where the judgment debuff comes into major problems. Because let's say you're running across to the priority ad. So you're now at the priority ad. You might be a good 15 yards away from the boss. Might be more. Because there's nothing to say this priority ad is going to be near the boss. And of course, Retribution Paladin is traditionally pretty good at bursting down priority ads. That's been our thing in WoD, certainly, and it's generally our thing. So there's nothing to suggest we won't do that again. But now you've got a decision to make. This ad needs to be burst down really quickly. It's not going to last that long. So we've got execution sentence ready to go. I want to put it on the boss because I don't want to put it on the ad, because by the time it lands, the ad might be dead. I've wasted all that damage. It does a lot of damage, execution sentence. So I have a macro that means it'll always go on the boss. But I need to burst this ad down. Now I've got judgment ready. What do I use it on? Do I use it on the boss so that it benefits from the execution sentence, or do I use it on the ad so it benefits from all the Templar's verdicts I'm about to pump into it? The other problem is, especially when you've got fairly low haste levels, which we will have at the start, at least, let's say we use Judgment and then the priority ad appears. We didn't expect it. It's not a raid where we've got boss mods or anything like that. We didn't expect the ad at that time. It just suddenly came in. We still have to switch to it because it's really important. But we've just used our Judgment. We've got Holy Power ready to go, which we need to pump into this thing. So now we're pumping our Holy Power finishers in. The Judgment debuff's doing nothing because it's on a completely different target. Again, all of these problems would be completely solved if it were a buff. But I just don't... and it's been in for so long, these problems have been there for so long, and it's so easy to change it to a buff that, I just don't think they will. But at the same time, I don't want to sound all doom and gloom. I do not believe they're going to keep Greater Judgment as it is now. I absolutely am convinced that they won't, because it doesn't work. And I think what's going on with Blizzard, obviously we're not privy to their discussions, they will recognise that it's not working as it is. They are very reluctant to make it a buff, which would be the simple fix. I think what they're trying to do is just think of something that fits their philosophy but makes it work. So we'll just have to wait on that. We'll just have to trust in them for that. Okay, next up is mobility. Now, this is a very prickly issue because, of course, we don't have any. More specifically, we are the only melee DPS not to have any baseline mobility. Speed increases, whether passive or whether on use. Now, some have better than others. I'm not saying it's all a case of all the melee classes have really awesome movement and we have none. Death Knight, especially Frost Death Knights, don't have much, but they have something. Demon Hunters, of course, it's really, really good. And Shamans, but, what we have to ask ourselves here, this is to get across this issue, is it really needed? Because from Blizzard's point of view, and I absolutely back them up on this one, a lot of people have complained about the homogenization of classes and specs over the last few years. That we all have effectively the same tools. It's not quite true, but you know where they're coming from. Now, Blizzard in Legion are very much trying to give every class and spec their own identity. And we can't fault them for that. A lot of people have asked for this, definitely. But, so what you have to... So, in theory, one class being really good at movement and ours not being isn't actually a problem, unless it's a problem, if you'll pardon the expression there. So what do we need mobility for? Well, we need it for a few things. By the way, I'm going to come at this from a PvE point of view. The need for mobility in PvP is completely obvious, but it's also the sort of thing that Blizzard could address through talents. I'm not saying they are, but there are honor talents, there are PvP specific talents. Blizzard could address it through that. So this is going to focus on PvE. So you're at the boss, and then all of a sudden there's going to be a very damaging mechanic around the boss, so you have to move out of it. This could be like something like Seething Corruption on Archimond Mythic or something like that, or a big meteor effect that's going to come flying in, or, anything like that. So you basically have to move. Now, first things first, if normal running speed is not fast enough to get you out of it, and we're thinking of things like, say, Seeds of Justice, behave yourself. Seeds of Doom on Fell Lord Zakuun, for example, on any mode, on all the modes. And you need to run away, but it's most important on Mythic that you run to a specific spot. Now, if you don't have a speed increase, normal running speed is not fast enough to get you that distance. You could have a Druid's Stampeding Roar, but then you are reliant on that, and what if it's not available? And what if everyone else is fine moving out of it and it's only you? They're not going to use a roar just for you. You then become maybe a bit of a liability on that fight. That's the danger. The danger is always, is it better to bring someone other than you into that fight, even though you might be a really good player and really understand the fight and really understand the mechanics, but if your spec is not capable of dealing with it, you'll just bring someone else in. That is always the danger. So from that point of view, do we need mobility? Well, if other melee have got it, and there's an encounter where that's the case, then yes, we do. Now, let's say there is a similar encounter, but it is possible to get away from it at normal running speed. Does it then still remain a problem? Well, it could do, because if you imagine two classes, one of them has really good movement and one of them has none. The one who has none, the effect comes in, you immediately move out, wait for it to land, move back in. You'll probably only just get out, let's say. The other class, abilities coming in, oh, that's no problem. Do a bit more damage, immediately move out just before it lands. And then, when it's landed, again, they may be able to move back in really quickly. Demon Hunters will be really good at this, as an example. Now, in that situation, that class has been able to do more damage because they've been able to stay in for a little bit longer before they've had to move out, and they've got back in much more quickly. Now, in that situation, even being able to get out in time is still a problem. So what do you compensate that with? Well, the only thing you can compensate with it is by having that class do more damage in the interim time, which will never happen because they need to be too powerful on fights that didn't require to move at all, and there's always fights like that. Or you make sure that no fight has such a mechanic very regularly. In other words, that you would be able to rely on a stampeding roar or something so everyone could get out at a reasonable time. The downside to that is that if you remember in Warlords of Draenor, when Mythics came in, that there's a set raid size. The reason for the set raid size, Blizzard said, was so that they didn't feel constrained when designing raid mechanics. Well, if they don't want to feel constrained, they shouldn't want to feel that these effects shouldn't happen fairly regularly. But if they happen fairly regularly, we're buggered. So from that point of view, do I think we should have a baseline mobility? Yes, I do. But that's not the only thing we need mobility for. The other thing is ad switching. So let's say we're DPSing the boss. The boss disappears for a little while. Ads spawn at the back. We need to get onto them really quickly. Again, slow as fuck. So we're waddling over there while everyone else is blasting their way over it. Again, there may be a stampeding roar at this point and it may be okay. Depends on regularity. And it always depends on the actual encounters. But very likely in a situation like that, on a fight where there's a lot of ad switching where you have to move as well. I don't mean ad switching that ads that have just spawned in like imps on Zul'Harak or Manaroth or something where they're brought to you. But actually ones that will spawn some distance away and are not going to move towards where you are. You have to move to them. In a situation like that, it will also be really bad. Now, if we look at what mobility we do have, it has been reduced quite a bit. It was already looking quite weak when I first entered Alpha, and Blizzard did say on the issue of both Retribution and DKs that would be compensated, but with like better defensives or more damage or something like that. Well, I'll get onto defensives next. But in terms of mobility, we have Seal of Light. What this does is it uses 3 holy power. It lasts a minute. And it gives us a 20% speed increase. I say it costs 3 holy power. It actually costs a random amount of... It's whatever holy power you happen to have. If you use 1 holy power, then it lasts 20 seconds. Up to 5 holy power for 100 seconds. 1 minute 40. Now, 20% speed increase is okay. And I don't think it's too much of a bind to keep it up either. I'm not actually hugely concerned by it. The main problem with it is that it competes with not only our on-use mobility, which is Divine Steed, which we'll come to in a moment, but also a really good defensive talent. So it's a case of choosing between mobility and defensive in a way that, again, other specs don't have to. Now, Divine Steed itself... I am going to have a bit of a moan. I know it sounds like I'm moaning about quite a few things in this one, but I'm also really positive about other things as well. I want to make that really clear. But the Divine Steed, I'm sorry, I think Blizzard have been a bit petulant with what they've done this build, I have to say. In previous builds, Divine Steed lasts for 4 seconds, which isn't very long for a non-use thing, and gives us a 100% speed increase. I would rather it lasted for longer with a small, like speed of light like now, 70%, but for longer. Because in 4 seconds, I mean, there's reaction times in there. You might waste a certain amount of it if you have to sort of change direction or something like that while you're using it. Again, there's just 4 seconds is just nothing. And one idea that was come up with was, why not make a poorer version of it baseline and then have the talent make it better? So we still have a on-use movement baseline ability, which maybe not all that brilliant. You know, a bit like the Death Knights one, which is a bit crap, but it's better than nothing. And then we have a talent to make it quite good. Well, what Blizzard seem to have done is just given us the crap version, but kept it as a talent. So now it lasts for 3 seconds. 3 seconds. It has a 45-second cooldown instead of a minute cooldown, but quite frankly, how often is that going to be a good thing? You know, if an ability is going to happen every minute, the older one would have been okay. There's not many things that are going to happen between 45 seconds and a minute. So this is just even shorter. And you might waste half a minute with your reaction when you fire it off. And towards the end as well. I mean, blimey. So I think it's basically Blizzard going, oh, you want a shit version of Divine Steed? Here you go. So I think it's basically a fuck you from Blizzard. I hope it's not. I hope they've just thrown something out there for the sake of changing it for whatever reason. It's the only thing they did change other than tuning this patch, this build, sorry. I don't know what possessed them to do it, but, you know, we'll see. We'll see. But that's our mobility at the moment. It's Divine Steed, which has, you know, makes us really quick, no problem with that, but for a very short duration on a fairly hefty cooldown, especially for its duration, and nothing baseline. Or Seal of Light, which I actually prefer. You know, if I was going to take one of those two, I would take the 20% one, because, you know, you can... the fact that... I have a bit of an issue. I sort of would prefer it if it was just costing 3 holy power. I've mentioned this before in a previous video. And it lasted a minute, because the fact that you use all your holy power means you might have banked a lot and then suddenly need to use it. And all of a sudden you've got a minute and 40 of this speed increase where you may not need it for that long. You probably won't, if truth be told. You don't need a 20% speed increase all the time. You just need it in short bursts. But at the same time, it's quite good, because let's say you need to move unexpectedly and you only happen to have 1 holy power. With the system I actually prefer, you'd have been a bit buggered. At least this way it allows you to use that 1 holy power and you get your 20 seconds. I just would have preferred it cost a flat. If I think about it now, I would change it so it cost a flat 1 holy power and lasted for 20 seconds. That would be great. If they could do that, that would be fantastic. Because there's nothing to stop you at the end of that 20 seconds using another holy power if you want, is there? That would actually be quite good, and I would think that our movement is then not as bad, even though it's costing a talent to use it. I would be much more positive about that. So that's mobility. Next we come on to defensives. Defensives, we're in a much stronger position. We have, first of all, we have the usual Divine Storm and Blessing of Protection. Both of these sort of work as they do in live, but they're both a bit better, in that they do not gimp your damage. Divine Shield currently means that your damage, as you know, is reduced by 50%. In Legion, it's not. You can use Bubble and do full damage, no problem. Great. Absolutely great. Still has a 5-minute cooldown. But there is a talent for that, which I'll go into in a bit. Blessing of Protection. Normally, Blessing of Protection has great trolling value in that we can put it on a Gnome Warrior during an execute phase. And, oh, isn't it funny, they can't execute. Unless they've got a cancel or a macro attack stuck onto their execute button. Now, that will no longer happen, because actually when you put Blessing of Protection on yourself, you can attack with the full range of abilities, including melee abilities. So you could put it on a melee and they're fine, they can just carry on attacking. You could put it on a tank and they're fine, they can carry on attacking. It still has a 5-minute cooldown though. It has a joke up to 30-second cooldown reduction via traits on the Ashbringer, which is a joke. Unfortunately, you have to go through these traits to get Ashes to Ashes, which is probably the best trait, or it's the one at the moment that I think is the best trait, which is a bit of a shame, but there you go. But those two, definitely better. We don't have access to Clemency, so there'll be no using 2 Blessing and Protections, unfortunately. But there you go. We also have Shield of Vengeance. This gives us an Absorb Shield. It has a 2-minute cooldown. It's quite a long cooldown. Now, what it does is if this Absorb Shield is completely depleted before the 15 seconds, which is what it lasts, is up, it will emit holy damage to your target equal to the amount of that Absorb Shield. Now, I'm not sure that I'm all that keen on the damage element, because what happens at this point is people start to see it as an offensive ability instead of a defensive ability, in much the same way Death Knights do with Anti-Magic Shell. And the downside there is, 1, you may be reluctant to use it when you should probably use it for defensive purposes. But 2, more importantly, remember, unlike AMS, which will simply do its best damage if you effectively fully deplete it, with this, it will not do any damage at all if you do not have that bubble burst, so to speak. If that Absorb Shield is not completely consumed within that 15 seconds, it does no damage at all. So now, when you're taking let's say there's a massive amount of raid damage going out, you can probably be fairly sure it will, like Feast of Souls on Gorfine. But let's say that's not the case. It's just a bit of damage. You should use it because, you know, it's a decent amount, but it's probably not going to burst the Absorb. You might be tempted to be a little bit dangerous, maybe stand in a little bit of fire just to make sure, so you get the damage out from it. So I'm not keen on that. I'm never keen, I've said this with the Demon Hunters as well, with another ability, on offensive abilities and defensive abilities being rolled into one ability. I'm not hugely keen on those at all. But the ability itself is nice enough. It is on a 2-minute cooldown, though. It seems a bit long for me, especially as we lost an ability called Hand of Light. Hand of Light was very nice. It was 1 minute. You put it on a mob, and every attack that took, it didn't even have to be your attacks. Could be your party or raid mates' attacks. But every attack it took healed you for 3% of your health. It would only work every second, and the hand lasted for 10 seconds. So in theory, you could get up to 30% health. If the mob died within that time, then you got an instant 40% heal. So it was also really good for soloing as well, you know, for keeping yourself healed up when you're finishing mobs off. Could also be used in a raid when you're killing off little targets as well. Just put it on when you know it's got no more than 10 seconds left. We don't have it anymore. There's no word on why it was taken from us, but it has been taken from us. Now that's a bit of a shame. We have had another defensive added a couple of builds though, called Justicar's Vengeance, which is now seems to be working reasonably well. It's still not working perfectly. It doesn't appear to be benefiting from our mastery, which it should do, but that's just a bug. That will be fixed. Don't worry about that. But even without that, it's working pretty well. What this ability does, it uses 5 holy power. That's one drawback. It does use 5 holy power. It works as a strike, very much like Templar's Verdict. The damage it does is actually decent. It does more damage than Templar's Verdict, but it does use more holy power. The damage it does per holy power is not as good as Templar's Verdict. So it's not a DPS increase to use it. However, if the target is stunned, it does 50% more damage. Now, that makes it quite tasty as a heal. It will still always be a DPS loss, though, if you think about it, because on, let's say, a single target boss, well, bosses tend not to be stunned. So you tend not to be able to stun them. So you will be using it instead of Templar's Verdict, hence DPS loss. In a situation where you can stun, in other words, where you've got mobs up, whether it's adds on a boss fight or just a trash pack, you'll be using it, even though you'll be using the stunned version, which does a lot more damage than Templar's Verdict. In that situation, you'd actually be wanting to use Divine Storm, so it'll do less damage than that. But that's good. We don't want something that heals us to be a DPS increase, because that would be clearly overpowered. So at the moment, it's nice. It does good damage and it does good healing now. And better still, I'm not 100% it's not benefiting from mastery, but it will do when it goes live, because it would make no sense to be otherwise. But it is quite nice. But brings me back to the earlier point I was making. Someone thought they'd noticed that on a mob that wasn't stunned when they used their Ashes to Ashes, it was classed as being stunned. which means that their Justicar's Vengeance was getting the extra 50% damage. Again, if that's true, that sounds like a bug, and I'm sure that will be cleared up. So we'll not assume that we can just use our Ashes to Ashes on the boss and get the extra benefit from it either. So the overall defensives is okay. I still think we should have Hand of Light, especially as they said we should, if we're going to have really crap mobility, we should be compensated with better defensives. Although I see our defensives as being good, I don't see them as being better than others. Better than some. It's better than Demon Hunters, for example, who have the really good movement. So, from that point of view, yeah. But I don't think there's certain situations where Hand of Light's really good where you couldn't use Justicar's Vengeance. Like, let's say you're having to run and you're taking damage and you can't be with the boss. It's like a running phase. Well, you could put Hand of Light on, and the range that can still hit the boss will be doing a bit of healing for you. So I can absolutely see situations where Hand of Light can be used that Justicar's Vengeance can't, and I do think it should be in there. But anyway, there you go. The other good thing about Justicar's Vengeance is it currently shares a row of talents with no serious competition. The other talents in that row I don't think are very good at all. You've got Word of Glory. The problem with Word of Glory is that it doesn't do very much healing to you, the Paladin, so it's no good just to heal you up. It relies on you doing AoE healing. But I'm going to talk about that in the next section on utility. The final thing we have is a talent called Divine Intervention. Now what this does is it passively halves the cooldown on our Divine Shield, which is really nice. Makes it a 2.5 minute cooldown, which is much more in line with similar strong defensives for other classes. The other thing is it sort of acts like a cheat death. If an ability would have ordinarily killed you, as long as you don't have Forbearance and as long as Divine Shield is available, it will trigger Divine Shield and put you up to 20% health. Now, I have used this quite a bit in dungeons, and it has saved my life, so to speak, quite a bit as well. It's quite handy. It's quite handy for a couple of reasons. First of all, there may be some mechanics where you can use this, so you could even argue it's some utility potentially, maybe not. But it also puts you in a position, sometimes you think to yourself with Bubble, should I use it? Would I die, do you think? And you might use it and maybe you didn't need to, and then you've blown it because, it's going to be a while before it's off cooldown again. Well, with this ability, you don't have to, just don't use it. It's just like, do I think I'm going to die here or not? I don't know. I don't care. If it turns out I would have done, then the Divine Intervention will proc. Now, your healers might not thank you for it because it means you're going to have taken basically a shitload of damage. You could have negated all the damage if you'd used your bubble. So, you'd still use your bubble if you know it would otherwise kill you. But if you're not sure, you just let it proc or not. So that's a reasonable defensive. So defensives in a pretty good state. Give us Hand of Light, and I think absolutely great. Now, on to utility. Now, I've made quite a bit of the fact that we basically don't really have any. We have a little bit, you could argue, so I'm not going to be disingenuous. I'm going to go through what we do have, and you can sort of decide to yourself whether it's worth it. We always have to judge it in the context of other classes, though. This is really important. You have to bear in mind that although they've taken that utility off us for the last 2 expansions, they've also taken it off other classes and specs. What matters is always, from a raiding point of view, is your overall toolkit enough to justify your place if you as a player are good enough? And if the answer is yes, then no problem. If the answer is no, then problem. So what we have in terms of blessings, we still have Blessing of Freedom. Not really used in raids. In fact, not used in raids at all. So I'm going to brush over that. Blessing of Protection, I've already talked about as a defensive, but to use on another player suddenly becomes utility. Might be interesting. If, and I don't know this yet, but if it can be used on a tank without that tank dropping aggro, then it could be used as a defensive for a tank. Because remember, we are losing Blessing of Sacrifice, so we don't have that anymore. But if Blessing of Protection can... I mean, it won't really replace it, because Blessing of Protection, remember, even with a fully traded artifact, has a 4.5 minute cooldown. So, but nonetheless, it does have the potential to be useful, and I certainly think it will see use on some fights. I think it will at least have some niche use, just like it did on Gruul in Blackrock Foundry. Now, the Greater Blessings, I have said, I did a video about the Greater Blessings some time ago. They're not a good mechanic, they're really not, but the horse has been beaten to a pulp and it is very, very dead. We're going to have these Greater Blessings come what may. So what we need to do is see how we can use them to our benefit. The important point I will reiterate is that the way, because this has irked me a little bit. I have seen obviously much more powerful, popular YouTubers than myself doing like videos on the Retribution Paladin and Legion and getting this completely wrong, because they're not really Retribution players, which means they're not actually reading up on all the stuff that Blizzard are putting out about them. They're just going in, hitting a training dummy, maybe doing a dungeon, and basing their opinion off that. Not knocking that, that's all you can do when you're trying to do all the classes, isn't it? But the way it's working in Legion now, in the Alpha, and the way it has been for months, is not the way Blizzard have said it's going to work when this goes live. Forget about Blessing of Wisdom and Blessing of Kings. I see almost no use for them. In fact, they're both feeble. So we're entirely talking about Greater Blessing of Might. Some people have said to make the other two more relevant, maybe we should only be allowed to put, instead of 3 Greater Blessings in total out there, maybe we should only be allowed to put 1 Greater Blessing of Might, 1 Wisdom and 1 Kings. I'm completely neutral on that point of view. But at the moment, we're looking like we are going to be putting out 3 Greater Blessing of Might on people. And it will obviously be on the 3 people that will do the most damage. Now, here's the thing. It is not a buff for those people. It is at the moment. It buffs those people's damage. But that's not how it's going to work. What it's going to do is all the damage that the people who have this thing on them generate is going to be counted towards the Paladin's damage. So in other words, we're going to have 3 other people responsible for some portion of our damage. But I'm not going to bang on about that. So how can we use this? Well, let's say there's a priority add situation that only a few people can do. For example, the boats on Iron Maidens. You get a few people go up. Greater Blessing of Might on 3 of those people. Go up there. So they'll do extra damage. It doesn't matter whose damage it counts for. The damage is still being done to their targets. So in a situation like that, it actually has some use. However, how often will that realistically be the case? Who knows? Another thing you can use it for is the fact that you're able to put it on people at different points of the fight. So let's say in the first minute of the fight, when the cooldowns are going, heroism's going, all the rest of it, and your best bursters, put it on them. And then, I'm not saying you swap this around all the time, that would be ludicrous. But let's say after a couple of minutes, you come to another phase. Maybe this is a phase where there's lots of movement, and the 3 people you had it on before are not actually all that good at moving and DPSing. So maybe you put it on 3 people who are best at that. Or maybe those first few people are the ones who have really long cooldowns, whereas there's 3 people who have much shorter offensive cooldowns, let's say 2-minute ones, who can do really good damage at the 2-minute mark. Make sure it's put on them for that 2-minute mark, maybe. I wouldn't recommend swapping it around every half minute. That would just be ludicrous. But if you swap it around every few minutes, if it's every 2 or 3 minutes, that may not be so much of a problem. You are going to have to do a full swap, though, even if you're only swapping it to 1 extra person, because the way it works is really weird. You might put Blessing of Might on a new person. Usually the person it comes off is the first person that was buffed with it, but sometimes weird things happen. I have noticed it suddenly randomly disappearing off people without them dying. I don't know whether they're clicking it off or what. When people change talents, for example, that's one to watch out for when you're on just before a boss pull. People change talents and then or change spec or whatever. It seems to fade off them. So you have to watch it on the actual pull timer. The people you intend to put it on at the beginning, just make sure it's on there. So we're also going to have to track who it's on so we can see. Other aspects of utility would be Word of Glory in theory. Now, I said I would mention this again. Word of Glory, in theory, would have some utility because it's an AoE heal that we have. Unfortunately, the amount of healing it does is not brilliant. And my issue with it, first of all, it's on a 1-minute recharge time. It has 2 charges. So 1 minute recharge time, and it costs 3 holy power. Now, straight away, I would be saying either it should cost holy power or it should have this really long recharge time of a minute. Not both. Both is too costly. For what it doesn't do a lot of healing. If it did a shitload of healing, I would say fine, fair enough. If it was like the old style Tranquility, for example, yeah, absolutely. That's not what it is. It doesn't do much healing at all. It might do just about enough in a tight situation. But then my other problem with it is it's centered on the Paladin and has a limited range, about 12-yard range. Now, the problem with this is you are assuming that the Paladin is the centre of all troubles. Well, what if they're not? What if it's the shitlords in ranged that are actually in trouble? If you're going to use it on them, you have to run over to them. Well, no one's going to do that. That's not realistic. So the fact that you cannot place it on someone and centre it around them is also pretty bad. So there are things wrong with it. In theory, it could be a reasonably nice piece of utility. But in practice, it's not at all. It's absolutely not. It competes with Justicar's Vengeance. But Justicar's Vengeance wouldn't be needed on every fight anyway. And certainly when you're on farm, you probably wouldn't expect to need Justicar's Vengeance. Certainly not anywhere near as much. But Word of Glory might still be useful for set periods of high damage or high raid damage. Now, in such a period, of course, you might stack, like Feast of Souls on Goldfield will stack, so fine. It might be useful for that. Obviously, it's going to be the cost of a significant amount of damage because it's using holy power. But, you know, utility is utility. Utility can mean a loss of DPS, and it's absolutely fine. What matters, of course, is that you are useful to the team. But if this thing is just costing you damage and it's not actually all that useful, so the talent at the moment I see it as not being all that useful. In terms of other things, we have Lay on Hands. The problem with Lay on Hands, and come to think of it, our piss poor Flash of Light, is it's very hard to say I've saved that person's life when you put a heal on them. Almost impossible. Because for all you know, the healers run to it. The only time you can ever say that is when there's 2 of you left alive. There's the tank who's like on very low health. No healers up. Okay, if you use Lay on Hands on them, you've saved their life. They will last a few seconds more. That give you a few seconds more to DPS the boss. If it's a sub 1% situation, maybe that's just enough to kill off the boss. But in most realistic situations, you might go, I use Lay on Hands on them. I've saved their life. No, because it was the same time that a big healer was going out from a healer. And as for Flash of Light, what? It's not even like I can plant my feet and try and use it on myself. It doesn't do very much on me. It's certainly in a raid situation not going to do a great deal on anyone else. Again, especially when there's healers about. So I'm not really going to class that either. So that's where we are for utility. It's pretty grim, but at the same time, if lots of other classes and specs don't have any either, then is it that big a deal? No. So that all depends on context. Now, when it comes to soloing, of course, this is going to be quite important for leveling and so on. We are actually in a pretty good shape. We are always, aren't we? Justicar's Vengeance actually makes us really good at going toe-to-toe with elites and beating them, especially as a lot of these things are demons in essence, because it's very demon-orientated expansion. So we can use Wake of Ashes and we can use our normal stun and alternate between those. We can use stuns quite regularly, which means Justicar's Vengeance does more damage and it's healing us for a lot as well. So it's really useful for that. Soloing in general, we are pretty strong at. We've got good tools for it, and we will have no problem in any situation. There are encounters, there are things that you might struggle with a little bit on most classes. All classes, if you can play it properly, you will do well on. But Retribution Paladin, you don't even have to play it all that brilliantly. You will be absolutely fine. So when it comes to solo play, doing quests, and remember, we'll do a lot more solo play because there's going to be a lot more world quests at level cap. It's not all about the leveling. Level cap stuff, and level cap stuff, of course, more elites and things to come across. And we will be as well prepared as any other DPS for those, and better than a lot, you would think. In terms of fun, obviously, it's really good. I mean, a question I was asking, it's a very sensible question, but is it fun, Phil? what I find fun may not be what you find fun. I find that the spec is enjoyable enough. If I think of it outside of a raiding context, then I am enjoying playing it. If they sort the judgment issue out, then again, I will have fun playing it. That's the only thing for me, and that's purely like a raiding type situation. For anything else in dungeons or soloing or anything else, I am, and remember, I don't PvP. I'm quite happy with most things about this spec. So I enjoy it. I think it's got a lot of tools to deal with a lot of stuff. So I personally do find it fun. Gameplay. Now, what I'm going to do is what I did for this, and the reason why this is a little bit more delayed than I normally would do, is I wanted to go into a couple of dungeons, really. And I went into one dungeon first of all, and the group broke up very quickly. We didn't even kill a boss. And then I did a full run, and that's absolutely fine. And then I did another dungeon, but it was only like the last boss. Only it was the last two bosses, sorry. But that actually allowed me to test what I wanted to test. But I did want to test out several talents. I'm not testing out the talents that I know are completely useless, but I wanted to test out the other talents. And what I've got is I've got some dungeon gameplay here for you, and I've got some logs after it, and I'm going to look at some of those logs after this gameplay. I don't remember if this is a boss or not. We just had a scripted event. I'm guessing it is. I think it is. Let's put this here. Yes, it is. What's that cube in the middle supposed to be? Oh, green stuff, not good. No one keep judgment up. Obviously, I'm not as mindful of the judgment debuff now because I've just been used to using greater judgment. I just need to remember to use it off cooldown because why would you use anything else the way it is at the moment? And this is one of the annoying things, of course, our AoE, but I'm going to cover that elsewhere. How easy it is to spot. Don't bounce me away. You know how I feel. Like, use Avenging Wrath, and you just so much miss Hammer of Wrath. I'm not going to have a pop about, oh, why can't we have Hammer of Wrath? But you do miss it. Oh dear. Right, we have to watch which one it goes to, don't we? Do we? Oh, he's in this one. Right, he's over there. 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 He's here. He's here. Ah, no, I've lost him. No, he's over there. Right, get this one. I'm sure it's this one. Am I right? I'm pretty sure I'm right. They think it's that one over there. Am I wrong? I think I'm right. We'll soon find out. I was right. Hurrah. I win at cups and balls. Why have they got arrows on their heads? So they just targets with landslides. Oh, he's gone again. Right, let's keep an eye on them. Is that one? Ah, shit, have I lost it already? That one, this one. Ah, help! I think it's this one. This one. This one. It's this one. I may have lost it right at the start, though. Yeah, I obviously did. Shit. I didn't think I'd got it. Oh no, it's alright, it's this one. I didn't lose it by far then. I think you need to take a step back, really. Probably easier for a range to do it, maybe. Or someone who can get back quickly, let's say a demon hunter with the old, what do you call it, ventral retreat. Do I remember this one? I think I remember this one. Not very fondly. For precisely that reason. Oh god. Just use Shield of Vengeance. Judgments. Oh, this is going to be a problem. All the DPS are fucking melee. I'm going to have to keep angling my cameras back. Ordinarily you might just think range would see them at least and tell everyone else they're out. Oh shit, tanks died, what the fuck? Oh, hold on. What? I don't know. Well, let's do something I always forget to do and switch a Greater Blessing East. Except it's taking it off me instead of the person who's dead. These Greater Blessings are an absolute nonsense, you know. The way they work. Just seems silly. Oops. Oh, I was saving up my holy power for Justicar's Vengeance then, but there's no need. Oh shit, now there's need. Gonna have to bubble, sorry, this is probably gonna put it on someone else. This shit, but I think we should just about kill it. Do we have to kill those? I'm going to guess we have to kill those. I completely can't remember. Oh. Okay. I seem to be lagging a little bit, or the not getting the responsiveness that I'd oh shit. Yeah, I used Shield of Vengeance there, it didn't pop off, so yeah, I'm not... Should we go behind these or something? Or, I don't know, just not be in front of them, maybe? Oh Christ. What's he up to? Where is... Yeah, this is why you're not supposed to... Yeah, okay. That was the thing. Okay, I remember, that's fine, that's okay. We just have to not let him smash them all up because we need that for the Magna thingy. See, this is a problem now. I've got to wait for Judgment to come back up to be able to put it on the target I've just had to switch to, which I didn't know was immediately coming up. And that is one of the great problems with the way the Judgment debuff works, and would be completely solved if it was changed to a buff. Some people have argued that, oh well, you know, Judgments do debuffs, that's what they do. But Judgments have also done buffs because die. Because I've been using it as a buff for the past few years with Long Arm of the Law. That's a buff from Judgment. Right, okay. Right, so start off with Execution Sentence. build up a bit of holy power, then Avenging Wrath, Judgment, and then just try and get those finishes off. Then Wake of Ashes. Wake of Ashes just, I mean, delay there a bit. It doesn't generate any holy power in this current state. And it's just a cycle thing like this, really. Get off execution sentence. Build up, build up. And then Judgment. So many things I'm to look at here. I mean, I've used something out of thingy there. No, this is the problem with no like baseline movement. Oh, Judgment fucking quick. No. Shield of Vengeance. I don't seem to be getting much in the way of healing. Is this do you know what? It is very easily to be distracted though. I use Judgment at the same time as Execution Sentence, which is no good. Right. I'm going to use the Word of Glory there. But it's no good, you see. This is the uselessness of it. We're spread out on a boss fight. So let's get back to doing some damage. Now I've just had Divine Intervention proc, and I'm still not getting healed. You know, I don't think Word of Glory is all that brilliant if you're stacked up, but if you're not, it's just... You know, this is the problem with this play style. You're totally distracted. Right, I'm just bopping. No, I'm not. I'm dying. It's a very awkward play style, not having Greater Judgment and using Execution Sentence if other little things going on as well, which of course there I'm trying to talk to you, and also, you know, I'm facing death like situations because this priest. How come I didn't get a res out of that? I thought it was AoE resin with priests. We didn't take so much damage. We just didn't get healed. Wasn't actually an excessive amount of damage. I was lasting for a great long time without ever getting healed up. Can this healer not even actually res now? Fucking hellfire, seriously. Where are they off now? Where's that healer fucking off to now? Shit, I'll have to heal myself up. Gosh, he was following the tank. He didn't know where he's going either. Oh well, okay, I suppose. I don't know. Yeah, that would be a good idea. Now, where's your great? Did he die as well? I don't know. Maybe he did. I didn't look to have died. Oh God. Latency obviously is going to make it much more awkward to use fine timing with Judgment and stuff like that, because if it's taking a second to go off, obviously you are going to miss a lot of things as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to Final Verdict and Greater Judgment. No, I'm not, because I'm in combat. Shit, hopefully I can get out. Because I just want to counterpoint it with this same group with everything else being the same. And with this latency, of course, as well, how much easier it will be, because there's just as much shit going on in the final boss in this place as in that one. And obviously, once we can get add-ons to be able to track things, that will make it a bit easier. But we still have the problem that... change quickly for... Now, is it because if someone changes talents, but then it affects everyone's greater blessing as well, or sometimes? What do we need to watch out for on this boss? Getting fucking no healing and dying. That's what. That's what we need to watch out for. No, some shit you have to stand in. This will go badly anyway. Just give it a go and then hopefully they'll see. And then give it a better go on the repull. Right, let me just check talents. I really want to take Justicar's Vengeance, but I feel I should give Word of Glory a fair crack. Now, for this boss, I can use Judgment on the pull, no problem at all. Or I can also use Avenging Wrath whenever I like. Just use Judgment off cooldown. Oops. Ah. I used the Blade of Justice with 4 holy power. So annoying. Alright, let's use the Shield of Vengeance here. See, I'm not getting healed up. It's taking too long. Right, so what we're going to have to do... Okay, actually that works out pretty well. People stood away from me with that, which is not bad. I've still got it though. Oh no, I've got it again, which is a better way of saying it. Is that it? They've changed this fight. It didn't used to be like that. Okay, so have a look at these. Now, if you look at the sort of... I've just uploaded bosses here. This Naltira, I wouldn't worry too much about that. We didn't even kill it. You know, the group disbanded. So the first real one was something called Rockmora. And we can see, again, just looking at Blanket is oh, blankets. Much more respectable, not doing as much as this guy. I might not be playing it quite so well. Or maybe they're just playing that really well. If we just go through them really quickly, top damage on that one. No problem, that's another single target one. Neuraxis, again, doing pretty well on that one. Dargul, which is the end boss, again, top damage on that one. So the damage is looking much better. And it's not just, because obviously I'm comparing myself with players I've not played with before. The actual damage numbers are higher, a lot higher than they have been. But again, if, you know, maybe you're in alpha or maybe you get into beta a bit later and you go into a dungeon, you see I'm doing really low damage, they might just be tuning a few things down. They will keep tuning things. It's really, you know, it takes more than one go to tune damage. And they will still be changing a few abilities as well, bear this in mind. I don't believe now that they will make major mechanical changes to damage. I think that they can still make significant changes to things like mobility or defensives or utility, because that doesn't affect their tuning of numbers. But I don't think they will make massive changes to damage abilities, but there are still some that they undoubtedly will. And of course they'll keep refining it. So what they do is they do one round of tuning and then they see how it goes up. And then they might need to do, oh, well, these are still a bit high, so they bring a couple of things down. And they have to decide, they don't just bring that class, every ability down by 10% damage or something. It's like, if it's one particular ability that seems to be overpowered, they might fiddle with that. So it is a process that takes a long time. So we have to bear with Blizzard on this one and trust that when the expansion launches, it will be in a reasonably good place. It usually is. They don't usually get it very badly wrong. And of course, they will be tuning throughout the expansion, because when the first tier set bonuses come out, that might make some specs more powerful than others, whereas previously we'd had no set bonuses. And again, they'll have to retune. So this is quite normal, so don't worry about that. But at the moment, it's looking much better. Now, here's something really interesting. So that was the full run I did, which you'll see on the gameplay. Then I went into the other one. I've forgotten the name of it. Blackheart Thicket or something. And before I show you the boss, the first boss, if you recall when I was doing that fight, I deliberately said, I'm not going to use Final Verdict, I'm going to use Execution Sentence, because on a single target fight, that's what we should be using. And I also said, I'm not going to use Greater Judgment, not because it's not good, but because I thought I don't think we'd be using this on a single target fight come when Legion launches. So I want to play it as I would expect to play it, with things that are single target, or should be single target DPS increases. And then what and if you remember on that fight as well, and I said the actual play style of doing that is a lot more engaging. It's a lot more difficult as well, especially when you haven't got things to track your shit. And and because I lost my train of thought a few times, I mean, there was a few things happening. The fact that I was trying to do some commentary at the same time meant I wasn't concentrating as much as I maybe should have been. But also the fact that I was taking damage and not being healed up was causing me concerns. The fact that I hadn't taken Justicar's Vengeance. I was using Word of Glory, so that was reducing my damage even further, remember. I was using Holy Power on a piss poor Word of Glory, just to show you guys how shit it's going to be on a boss. It might be alright on trashing a dungeon where people are grouped up a bit more, but on a boss where people tend to be spread out, no good. So I was trying to show that. And then on the last boss of this instance, Shade of Xavius, I went the other way and I said, okay, back to Final Verdict and back to Greater Judgment and so on. And the damage was on a par with the tank and a lot less than these warlocks. Now, what I want to show you is, so I would have expected my damage to be more competitive on this boss, because I was using what I thought were currently the DPS way to go. And I don't think I was using them more badly. Whereas if I'm just show you the boss where I used Execution Sentence, which, you know, but I didn't use it well, and I kept losing my train of thought and I kept cocking up the use of Judgment, did most damage? What? Seriously, what is that about? I need to actually check something here, because I don't know this Noid fella. He died, so that explains him. Did he die? He didn't die. That's strange. That's curious, isn't it? It's both a single target fight. This is one where I was really, as melee especially, being concerned that I was taking a lot of damage and not getting healed up. And yet I did load less damage than him on this one. Isn't that curious? Of course, that's just one fight. You'd have to do a number of fights to really test it out properly. But still, the fact of the matter is that our numbers are in a pretty good state. I mean, this is me. You can see it's all around about the 76-ish mark DPS, no matter what I'm using. Because the other thing I wanted to test out was, does it really matter what talents I use? In terms of min-maxing, there will always be a talent that's that's good for me on a particular encounter, depending on what my role is and all the rest of it on that fight. But, you know, if someone's just going to go, you know, just play a dungeon, not worrying about absolutely min-maxing it, does it make a huge difference? Because it shouldn't. The answer seems to be actually you can sort of get away with quite a lot of, or a fair bit of variation, really. So, yeah. So have a look at the logs yourself. You can have a look at a few things you see. I mean, if we look at this, for example, let's go back to, say, Dargrul. This is one. I just want to look at a few things like Greater Blessing of Might. You can see this is doing like 6%, which is much more in line with what I would expect with the Blessings of Justice talent working. Who else did I give it to? Just over 3%, not great. But, you know, dungeon fights don't necessarily last ages. Who was the other DPS guy? I don't think it was that one then. Aha, 4. So it seems that it's doing a bit more damage as well. Maybe the Blessings of Justice talent is working a bit better and it is actually doubling the effect. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that. That'll be definitely one of the things I want to sort of keep an eye on. If we have a look at where I'm doing my damage from, of course this was with Final Verdicts, Templar's Verdicts, absolutely. All the way there, followed by Judgment. With the Greater Judgment, remember, not only are you using Judgment off cooldown, which I wouldn't do if I was using Execution Sentence, but also Judgment itself does a decent amount of damage. If I compare that with this one where I was using Execution Sentence, of course, then that becomes the highest damage ability. And Judgment much lower down. One, because I'm not using it off cooldown, because I need to make sure I'm using it so that it lands for this, and that, you know, I have this window that I need to use my spenders in. And of course, it's not buffed directly from it as well. Okay. But there you go. See what you think of that. And if you've enjoyed the video, sorry it's a long one, but don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. If you've got any specific questions, then do ask them. If I get enough, I'll do a follow-up Q&A. If not, I'll just answer them directly in the channel. And until next time, I'll see you later.